Margaret stood by her living room window, watching the morning unfold on Willow Creek Drive. The successful real estate developer had everything money could buy: the grand colonial home, the luxury cars, the finest clothes, everything except the one thing she wanted most. To hear her daughter's voice, 7-year-old Emma had been silent since birth. Specialists from Boston to San Francisco had examined her. There was no physical reason for her silence. The doctors used complicated terms like selective mutism and psychological barriers, but Margaret didn't need their vocabulary. She just wanted to hear her little girl say "Mama." Emma communicated through gestures and drawings, her expressive blue eyes speaking volumes. She was bright, creative, and loving, but the silence created an invisible wall that Margaret couldn't breach. No matter how many therapists they visited or how much love she poured into each day, that Tuesday morning started like any other. Emma sat at the kitchen table, drawing pictures of flowers while Margaret prepared breakfast. Then came the familiar rumble of the garbage truck making its way down the street. Emma's head lifted. She set down her crayon and walked to the window with purpose. "Sweetheart, what is it?" Margaret asked, following her daughter's gaze. Outside, a man in an orange safety vest was emptying the bins with remarkable care. Unlike previous workers who rushed through their route, this one took his time. He was in his early 40s, with kind eyes and a worn white hard hat that had seen better days. What happened next made Margaret's heart skip a beat. The man noticed a small stuffed rabbit that had fallen from one of the bins. Instead of tossing it in the truck, he carefully cleaned it off with a handkerchief and set it on the porch steps. Then he moved to the next house, whistling a gentle tune that drifted through the morning air. Emma pressed her small hand against the window glass, watching intently. Over the following weeks, Margaret began to notice a pattern. Every Tuesday and Friday, Emma would abandon whatever she was doing the moment she heard that truck. She'd rush to the window and watch the man work. His name was Thomas. Margaret learned from the waste management office when she called with a question about recycling. He'd been with the company for 3 years. A single father, they mentioned, raising a son after his wife passed away from cancer. Thomas treated his work with dignity that seemed to transcend the job itself. He'd straighten toppled bins, pick up scattered newspapers, and once spent 10 minutes helping an elderly neighbor carry her trash cans from the garage. One morning, Margaret found Emma at the window a full 30 minutes before the truck's usual arrival time, clutching a drawing she'd made. It showed a man in orange, with a big smile, surrounded by flowers and sunshine. When Thomas appeared, Emma did something unprecedented. She grabbed the drawing and her mother's hand, pulling Margaret toward the front door with urgent determination. "Emma, what are you doing, honey?" For the first time, Margaret could remember, her daughter didn't retreat at the prospect of meeting a stranger. Instead, she opened the door and stepped onto the porch, the drawing held carefully in both hands. Thomas was emptying their bin when he noticed the little girl. His weathered face broke into a warm smile. "Well, good morning there," he said gently, setting down the bin with care. "That's a beautiful picture." Emma held it out to him, her eyes bright and hopeful. Thomas knelt down, bringing himself to her level. He accepted the drawing with the reverence one might show a priceless painting. "Is this for me? This is just about the nicest thing anyone's given me in a long time." He studied it carefully. "You made me look like a superhero. I'm just a guy doing his job, but I appreciate how you see me." "Thank you, sweetheart." Something shifted in that moment. Emma's face lit up with a joy Margaret hadn't seen in years. "She doesn't speak," Margaret explained softly, stepping forward. "She's been silent since birth." Thomas nodded with understanding, not pity. "My son Jamie, he's 8. He struggled with talking to after his mama died. Took him almost a year to find his words again. Some things can't be rushed." He looked at Emma again. "But we don't need words to say important things, do we? This picture says plenty." From that day forward, a quiet friendship bloomed. Thomas would wave to Emma each pickup day. She'd wave back, sometimes leaving small drawings tucked into the recycling bin where he'd find them pictures of sunshine, flowers, birds, and always that man in orange. Larger than life, Margaret watched her daughter transform. Emma smiled more, drew with greater enthusiasm, and began showing interest in the world beyond their door. One Friday in October, something extraordinary happened. Margaret was in the kitchen when she heard the truck arrive. Emma rushed to the window, as usual, but Thomas wasn't visible. Another worker was handling their street. Margaret saw the disappointment wash over Emma's face. But then, walking up their driveway, came Thomas, not in his uniform, but in jeans and a flannel shirt, his young son beside him. The doorbell rang. Margaret answered, curious and cautious. "I hope you don't mind us stopping by," Thomas said, hat in hand. "It's my day off. But Jamie here wanted to meet Emma. I've told him about the beautiful drawings. He likes to draw too." Jamie, a shy boy with his father's kind eyes, held up a small box of art supplies. "Dad said maybe we could draw together," he asked hopefully. Margaret looked at Emma, ready to protect her daughter from any situation that might cause distress. But Emma was already nodding, reaching for Jamie's hand with trust that brought tears to Margaret's eyes. The children sat on the porch, Paper and crayons spread between them. Thomas and Margaret watched from nearby chairs, making gentle conversation about autumn weather and the changing leaves. "You've made such a difference in her life," Margaret said quietly. "She looks for you twice a week, like you're bringing Christmas morning." Thomas shook his head humbly. "I just treat folks the way I'd want to be treated. My mama raised me to understand that dignity isn't about what job you do, it's about how you do it. And children, they see straight through to what's real. Emma reminds me why kindness matters." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children create colorful masterpieces side by side. Jamie chattered away, not bothered by Emma's silence, filling the space with stories about school and his new puppy. Then it happened. Emma was drawing a picture of a bird when her crayon rolled off the porch. Jamie reached for it, lost his balance, and tumbled down the steps, not seriously, but enough to scrape his knee and startle everyone. Thomas was moving toward his son when the sound stopped, everyone cold. "Jamie," the word came from Emma. Small, uncertain, but clear as a bell, the world seemed to hold its breath. Emma's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock at the sound of her own voice. Thomas knelt beside his son, checking him over while Margaret knelt before Emma, tears streaming down her face. "Emma, baby." "Jamie, okay," Emma whispered, the words careful and deliberate, like someone testing ice on a frozen pond. "I'm okay," Jamie said, grinning through his surprised tears. "Did you just talk? That was so cool." Thomas looked at Margaret, then at Emma, understanding the magnitude of this moment. "She found her voice," he said simply. Emma nodded slowly, then looked at Margaret. "Mama," she said, the single word carrying 7 years of unspoken love. Margaret gathered her daughter into her arms, both of them crying now. "I'm here, baby. I've always been here." In the months that followed, Emma's vocabulary grew steadily. She didn't become a chatterbox overnight. She remained thoughtful, choosing her words carefully. But she spoke. Thomas and Jamie became regular visitors. The families shared Sunday dinners and autumn walks. Margaret learned that Thomas had been working 2 jobs to support his son, that he read to Jamie every night, that he believed work of any kind was honorable if done with pride. She helped him enroll in night classes, something he'd dreamed of but couldn't afford. Not charity, but friendship. The kind where people lift each other up because that's what humans do at their best. On Emma's 8th birthday, she stood before her cake and made a speech that had everyone in tears. "I was scared to talk," she said carefully, "but Thomas showed me that being scared is okay. You just need someone to be kind until you're not scared anymore." Later that evening, as guests mingled and children played, Thomas and Margaret stood on that same porch where everything had changed. "You gave us a miracle," Margaret said. Thomas smiled, watching his son and Emma chase fireflies across the lawn. "I just showed up and did my job." The miracle was already in Emma. She just needed to know the world was safe enough to share it with. Margaret understood then what she'd somehow forgotten in her pursuit of success and solutions. Sometimes the greatest gifts come not from those with the most credentials or resources, but from those who simply show up with kindness, day after ordinary day, treating each person they meet with dignity and care. A garbage collector with a gentle smile had unlocked what expensive specialists couldn't, not because he tried, but because he lived with a grace that made a silent child feel safe enough to find her voice. And in doing so, he'd reminded them all of something essential. We're never just doing our jobs. We're showing the world who we are. And sometimes, that's exactly what someone needs to become who they're meant to be.